You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Exciting news. This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, who have been telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com, and then definitely follow them on Instagram for all the information that you need, because I'm sure that's where you follow us as well, at oklahomahof. Let's get into today's episode.
Reason I'm here today is I'm going to interview a mate of mine who has a fourth generation business from Oklahoma. Been in business over 75 years. Pretty interesting. We met on the golf course, like most of the mates that I have. But welcome to the podcast, Mr. Matt Brown.
Hi, Mike.
How's it going?
Great.
Yeah?
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's been a while, isn't it?
It has been, for sure.
Last time we played golf was Shangri-La, I think
you're correct.
Right?
Yes.
Up there.
Yeah, it probably was Shangri-La, and then before that, maybe in Shawnee.
Yeah, we played the Fire
I believe
Lake.
we played in the Fire Lake tournament.
We did. And that's obviously a lot to do with work, isn't it, for you?
Correct.
Right? It's not just like, oh, we're going to go play golf and have a great time. It's
No,
technically
that is a
business.
That golf is a business event for us.
Mm-hmm.
The Potawatomi tribe is one of our customers. We supply fuel to their grocery stores and gas stations.
Yeah. So for people listening who don't know you, don't know the business, it's Red Rock Distribution and been in business since 1937.
Yeah, actually, my great-grandfather started the business prior to that.
Okay.
And then we acquired a business called Red Rock Distributing, which was a Conoco distributor back in the mid-30s. And so we switched the name of the entire company to Red Rock Distributing in 1937 and have called it that ever since. Before it was called Brown and Sons.
Yeah.
And so my great-grandfather started it, and my grandfather and his brother, after they went to college and served in the military, came back, went to work with my great-grandfather, and then my father worked here, and now I'm here.
It's just nature family business. So was great-granddad in the war? In the World Wars?
He was not.
Okay.
And my grandfather served, but not in no action,
Right.
Particularly, but he was in the military and on the West Coast here, and really he wanted to be a farmer. He went to Oklahoma State, got his ag degree, and his whole idea, my life would be completely different now, as you know
totally
me
different.
very well. I could be a farmer, which is hilarious in a bunch of different ways, but so that he wanted to come back and be a farmer, and my great-grandfather said, "Hey, I need your help. I need you and your brother to help me out with this business." And so I wouldn't say begrudgingly, but probably a little bit begrudgingly, he came back and got in the business with my great-grandfather in the Stockyards.
Yeah, which it was a gas station and a store at that point, right?
Right.
When
they had a
first died
service
out.
station, and then they had what we call a bobtail, which was a really small tank truck that had, back then I think it had like a 500-gallon tank on the back, and they would sell fuel to other places out of the 500-gallon tank and distribute it that way. But most of it was through the service station where my grandfather and his brother worked, and in the full service days of service stations where they did tires, batteries, accessories, gas, everything was done right there. And that first station we still, which was down in the Stockyards, we still own both of the spots where those original stations were down in the Stockyards.
So the stations aren't there, but you still have the land.
Correct.
Cool.
Yeah, we finally took at 9th and Agnew. We finally took that station completely out of service and took the tanks out and everything 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh, so recent then.
Yeah, I mean, it hadn't operated as a gas station in 30 years, but we we had a bunch of tanks over there, so sometimes we would store bulk fuel over there if we needed to for something. And finally, it was time to just kind of repurpose that whole deal. So we've got some plans to do some other stuff over there eventually, but right now, yeah,
because it's such a cool area, isn't it? Then I don't think it gets the traffic it deserves.
It's kind of a weird, before Bricktown, before Plaza District, before all these other districts, Stockyards was kind of the hub of Oklahoma City. It's what made it go. It's still got the largest, working auction in the United States, I think. They process a ton of cattle as well as other livestock through there every Monday and Tuesday. And, it's a great little area. But it's definitely an area, I think people from Oklahoma, don't necessarily embrace their Western heritage in the way maybe they should. And, maybe I'm a perfect example of that. I'm not the most Western person you've probably met
people
doing
listening,
this.
People listening to this that know you are laughing their heads off right now because they can't see you on a farm.
Right.
At all.
No.
Yeah.
Me driving a tractor or, I guess mucking stalls or doing any of that stuff. But when I was little, that was part of my life. My grandfather, that was the first thing he did when he was able to, is he bought a ranch and farm out in Paden, just outside of Paden, Oklahoma, which is close to Prague. And he raised, we had cattle and alfalfa and all kinds of different things. So growing up, I got to see, a little bit of all of that. And I think it's important. I probably have not done a great job with my kids in sharing some of that with them, but I grew up riding horses. I grew up, going to the farm every weekend with my dad and grandfather. And, it was a great piece of my life. And, maybe someday when I get older, it'd be fun to have a ranch and not have to do all the work, maybe. Yeah,
exactly. That's the cool thing, isn't it? Is having a horse and having a ranch and not having to do anything, but having all this land to just roam around and do whatever you want.
Maybe I'll just call Ralph Lauren and see if I can ride over and go over to the RRL ranch and kind of hang out with him and do whatever he does.
Yeah, that wouldn't suck, would it?
That sounds like a pretty good plan.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the store is. They're everywhere, but the one I'm thinking of is one in Santa Fe, and it's in the square in Santa Fe, and it's just like a Western store. I can't remember what it's called, but the catalog of it is what I would see as that's my view of being on a ranch. It's just like riding this beautiful horse dressed in this great Western way, more fashion than working
kind of the
way.
Marlboro man
Exactly.
Of today. And I think there's something great about being out in the country and not having to worry about driving and getting somewhere in a hurry or getting to your next appointment or doing whatever. There's definitely something relaxing about it, and I loved that part of my life. It's just not as easy today as it was back then to make that a reality. But yeah, things could have been very different had my grandfather had his way, and maybe I'd be doing something totally different on a combine or a tractor, or
which is still a massive business too. It's Oklahoma's one of Oklahoma's biggest businesses, and the ag industry, especially coming out of OSU and everything that they have going on. I don't think people realize how big it is.
No, it's amazing, and it's not just in the obvious places, but you go out to Western Oklahoma, and forever, for miles and miles, you just see farms, and same thing in southwestern Oklahoma, southeastern Oklahoma. It's northeastern Oklahoma there's still quite a bit of agriculture, but it's a little bit different size and scale just because it's so green and the terrain's different. But yeah, I think that's an important part of the Oklahoma story, and I'm by far the least Western person on the Stockyards Main Street organization board that I've served on for the last, I guess, almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It's great to have perspective that's different, and go down there and see people and see successful people that have been down there for a long time.
Right.
David Egan and Cattleman's and the guys over at Langston's and Joe at Little Joe's. And I mean, there's great places to go, as you know, and experience and see a little bit of what Oklahoma is all about. There's great artisans and craftsmen down there making hand-tooled saddles and all kinds of stuff. So it's a great...
Shorty's is there too, the hat place,
Shorty's is there. She does an amazing job with custom-made hats. And it's a great spot to go and kind of experience, what Oklahoma was like and kind of how we got to where we are today. I mean, everybody thinks of Oklahoma as being, kind of an oil place, which it is, but it got its start really in all earnestness in, being an agricultural hub. Oklahoma City, Kansas City, kind of these Chicago, these kind of central parts as people moved west. This is where they brought their livestock, and there were tons of packing plants down there and processing plants. And my grandfather always referred to that area as Packin' Town, which I never really fully understood until I came back here in my older years and kind of learned a little bit more of the history. But
so great granddad starts the business, and gets granddad in, and you're, I guess, how do you say, granddad's brother? I don't know what that becomes. Anyway, family start the business, and it quickly grows, and you have go into having quite a lot of convenience stores too, right?
Yeah, in the 70s. I mean, we've always owned like service stations, or during my grandfather's tenure, we owned some what would be traditional service stations.
Sure.
A couple of truck stops along I-35 and I-40, and we would distribute the fuel to ourselves, and then in the mid 70s. This kind of concept of converting service station bays into like mini grocery stores started. About the same time, you had the Browns from 7-Eleven. You had Tom and Judy Love out in Watonga start Love's. And my dad converted the first couple of our service stations into convenience stores. And again, it was basically just taking the bays of the service station. Instead of having roll-up doors, you built a wall and built a couple of doors in, and you just sold basically groceries. And we got up to, I believe, 32 convenience stores in the Oklahoma City area. I mean, metro area. We had them Edmond and Choctaw and Hara and Nakoma Park. And so we had those stores, and that was kind of my dad's. Well, it wasn't by far not his only contribution, but it was a big part of what he did when he came back after being at Oklahoma State. He came back, went to work with my grandfather, and kind of did the C-store bit. Back then we had, I think when we sold the stores in a couple of different packages, but 1997 was when we sold the last group of stores, and I think kind of during that time period, we had 250 maybe employees running all the convenience stores. It's a very labor-intensive business. So
when you go into bat with like 7-Eleven and OnQ and all the rest, you have like the worldwide kind of the nationwide kind of network of stores, right?
Right.
And I know 7-Eleven is Oklahoma only state, right? We have. Which
right,
is a completely
and
different
everybody
dynamic,
has a little different. Back then it was pretty much a lot of independent people. So, like we had stores that were called Save a Stop convenience stores. There's a lot of Walgreens on the corners now where we had Save a Stop convenience stores, but Save a Stop and 7-Eleven were kind of the big, like locally owned. Obviously Love's as well, but Love's kind of changed their strategy and went more towards travel stops.
Gotcha.
And 7-Eleven kind of continued to grow here in the city with their convenience stores. And then the major oil companies realized that there was money to be made in that. And they had always... they have several different arrangements, but they had arrangements with people like us who were distributors to sell gas through our stations and stores, and they realized that, hey, maybe we should own some of those. So growing up for me in the 70s and 80s, the biggest competition that we faced was the same people who were selling us our gas also owned other stations, and so we were competing with them.
Like BP, Shell, Phillips, and Esso,
well, and here it
stuff
was
like
Texaco, Conoco, Phillips. Those were the big three at that time. And then, of course, Texaco turned into Shell. And then for a small time, Total was here, or Total, as people in Oklahoma would call it. And they were purchased by Valero, and so now you see Valero stores here.
Right.
And then Conoco and Phillips merged together. So, the industry kind of evolves about, it seems like most things in life, about every 10 to 20 years there's kind of a change in the way things go. And in the early 2000s, the oil companies decided they wanted to get out of directly operating those retail sites, and so they sold a bunch of those. And so then you had places like Star Fuels, Star Mart was a big brand here, kind of in the 2000s, I guess, from probably about 2004 to 2010 or 11, and then they sold to Kmart, so that's where we get some of the K stores. And so now it's mostly independent people working to sell as much gas as they can and as much stuff as they can inside.
Right. Do they make the independents? Would you say their revenue comes a lot more from what's in the store rather than the gas?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the gas, we joke all the time.
The gas just brings them to the corner, and then they have to upsell everything that's in the store.
Right. I mean, grocery stores don't post the price of milk or bread on the outside of their sign and say, hey, come in here. They say, hey, we've got a bunch of stuff, and you go in and you just pay whatever it is.
Sure.
Gas stations, for whatever reason, thought that was a great idea. You can go back to the pictures of the 30s, and there are pictures of the price outside, which just makes no business sense at all. There would be no case study where you would ever say this is the best way to sell your product. But we've always posted our prices on the outside, and so gas is really a way to get people to the site. And then you hope that you can get people inside the store and let them come in and buy something at a little bit higher margin. The gas margins are pretty small overall.
And I'm sure getting smaller over time.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I don't think, unless you were born into this business, there isn't anybody who would say, oh, I want to be a fuel wholesaler. This seems like a great business model. The returns are fantastic on the ROI is, people would laugh if they actually knew what but it's a volume-based business now. And that wasn't always the case, but it has been for the last 30 years or so, and has kind of evolved into that, to where now there's been a lot of consolidation. That's what I did a lot of when I very first came back. I spent a lot of my time finding other wholesalers like us who were small and, were tired of the business or didn't have a succession plan. And so we did 6 acquisitions in the first 10 years or so that I was here, 5 or 6, and grew our volume to, be able to compete a little bit better now. And so, very slim margins, but still a great business, and something that, I think in Oklahoma, people probably don't appreciate as much their freedom and their ability because we just take it for granted. But when you travel, when you go to New York or you go to other big cities and actually are in the city itself, even Dallas to some degree has this issue today, between traffic and getting around. It is almost easier to use public transportation than it is to have your own car.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas here, I and no disrespect to Embark or any of the public transit people that we have here, but I don't know anybody who uses that on a regular basis, because
I still haven't used it.
You can literally drive yourself or The city has been much better about building bike lanes. I mean, you can ride your bike places now. We spend a bunch of money on sidewalks. I mean, it's a much more accessible city than it ever has been, for sure. But definitely being able to drive your car somewhere is an important part of being a Midwesterner, if you will. And calling Oklahoma a Midwest state is probably a little bit silly, but they tend to lump themselves into that category.
Yeah, definitely. So you kind of graduated university and then went to work for Phillips, is that right?
That's right. I went to school here, then I went to Southern Methodist University in Dallas after I graduated high school, and spent 4 years down there. And this is a typical me story, which you'll appreciate, Mike, but I had a bunch of friends that were either in my fraternity or just guys that I knew, and we had a plan that after we graduated, we were going to take a year off, and we had cleared this with our parents, that we were going to take a year off and travel and kind of, I guess the fancy word now is gap year, yes, but we were going to kind of take this year and travel and experience things and kind of figure out what we all wanted to do. And this was in 1994. We were all juniors, and this was back in the time when financial consulting firms, and we were all in business school. And so we would go, and we were getting recruited all the time by, Goldman Sachs or whoever, all these different consulting firms. And kind of one by one, my buddies that were supposed to go on this trip ended up signing these deals because they were, basically getting paid to come and intern and then take a job as soon as they graduated. So our group of 6 dwindled down to 3 pretty quick. And then about 3 months before we graduated in May of 95, the last 2 guys were like, "Hey, I hate to break this to you, but..." And one of them went to Goldman. I think the other one went to Arthur Andersen. I can't remember now, but they're like, "Yep,
we've been offered a good position.
We can't pass this up." And I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, the whole time I've just been planning what I'm going to do for the next year. I had not been. I had gone to some of these deals, but I hadn't taken it very seriously, obviously, because nobody was offering me a job." And so I kind of had to figure out what I wanted to do. And I wouldn't say I took off the year. I did work, but there was a store in Dallas that I shopped at, and I had some retail experience when I was in school before college. So I kind of took a buyer/manager job for a family-owned business in Dallas for about 9 months while I figured out what I wanted to do. And back then, this is before Skype and video interviews and all of that, but I interviewed with, I think 4 oil companies and ended up picking to work for Phillips in Bartlesville strictly because it was in Oklahoma.
Right.
I had offers from Conoco to go to Houston, from Koch Industries to go to North Carolina. And I just was not interested in doing that. I was, I guess at that time I was dating my now wife, and it just seemed like that would be way too far for us to spend that much time apart. So went to work in Bartlesville for Phillips, and it probably was one of the better decisions I made, and for all the wrong reasons, probably. But
it turned out to be okay.
It turned out great. It was, I learned everything there was to learn about the people that I do business with now from the inside, which I would have never... I didn't think about it like that at the time. But instead of just coming back and working in the family business like my grandfather and my dad had done without really any other experience, I worked in a couple of different family retail operations, and then went to work for one of the biggest oil companies in the world and learned how they operated. And so it's been a huge benefit to me now on this side as we
deal with
do
those
contracts
companies
or
and all
work
that
with
stuff.
them on different things. I
Right.
know now it's been a while since I worked there, and I'm sure some things have changed, but
But you know what
large
ticks their
companies
boxes
like
and
that,
stuff like that, right? You know what they
You
look
bet.
for, and it's much easier for you to negotiate with them because you can say, hey, I know what you do. I worked
Right.
in your shoes.
Well, and they, I'd never worked for a company that had stockholders.
Yeah.
All of as many jobs as I had and people I had worked with, they had all been family businesses. I mean, I grew up working in a family business,
Yeah.
and then I worked for 2 other families in their businesses. And so I joke, I went to work there and I had a secretary. When I got there, I was like 22. And I had a secretary who was in her early 40s.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do I do with the secretary? I've never had a secretary. My dad's never had, I don't even know
Right.
what you do with the secretary.
Yeah.
And she was great. She had worked for the company for a long time, and she was great at kind of explaining to me how it works. And,
Yeah.
I was lucky too, in that I knew my end goal. At that point, I'd known all along I wanted to come back and work with my dad. He's always been, a mentor of mine.
Sure.
And I knew I wanted to come back here and work with him. I knew it was going to be hard with my grandfather and my dad. Like 3
Okay.
Browns in
Yeah.
the same place might be
Right, because
2 Browns
you
too
come
many.
back with all of this, progressive, I want to do this, this, and this. I think this is where things are going. This is what I see out there. And your granddad's just like, this is how we've done it. This is how we've always done it. Nothing needs to change. We're still making money, right?
Right. And my grandfather worked until he was in his early to mid 80s, which is pretty crazy. But he's from that generation
Yeah.
that was what he did. He played golf, recreationally, but he didn't really I wouldn't call it a hobby. He never played during the week. He only played on Sundays. And he played with my grandmother or with me and my grandmother.
Yeah.
But he was not if somebody called him to play on a Thursday.
It's like, no, I have to work.
Yeah. There was no business excuse for him to be
Which is
playing
totally
golf.
different in today's world,
What are
right?
you saying, Mike? Yeah.
If I get an excuse to play golf, I want to go play golf.
I can think of a few business reasons to play golf during
Exactly.
the week. I'm not afraid of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
And I guess it's now easier with technology, and you can still be answering quote emails while you're on the golf course.
100%. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of it too has to do with your business management style. I've been very lucky. My grandfather wanted his finger on everything. He was what I would consider today to be a micromanager of, every decision,
Yeah.
everything. He made all of those decisions, not in a vacuum, but whatever he wanted to do is what happened. And my dad was basically 180 degrees from that. He was find the best people to do the job and then let them do their job, oversee them,
Right.
check on them, make sure they're doing what they should be doing. If they need your help, offer some input, but hire people who are better than you to
Yeah.
do those jobs, and you manage those people. And so I was really lucky kind of from afar to watch those 2 different
Right.
styles work. And I came back here in 2000. Or I made the decision to come back in 2000. Technically, I guess I came back in 2001,
Yeah.
right after the first of the year. But it was great because my grandfather was still here. My dad had kind of taken over the leadership role of the company, but my grandfather was still here. And I came back and got to this office that we're in now. That was kind of one of my projects to build. And so we built this new office and moved in here. Moved my grandfather in with us. And so all 3 of us were here for about, it's been a while, but I think it was 6 months, 7 months, and realized pretty quickly that my grandfather this was not his cup of tea.
No.
Not only the building itself, but just kind of the way that we operated was
Right.
not for him. And he didn't have as much direct relationship with the business at the time. He had started some other businesses. He got into the car wash business and had a decent real estate portfolio. And so
Right.
he was doing his own stuff, but having him here in the office with Dad and myself, it was hard for him because he was used to being in control.
Yeah.
And so I joke with my dad that he had the world's shortest tenure as the leader of the company because my grandfather was here, for the 5 or 6 years that I wasn't here, even though my dad was technically in charge of things. And then I roll in, and probably the greatest gift my dad ever gave me was kind of letting me do what I wanted to do. I mean, I think people who know our family and have grown up with us, will tell you that I'm probably an interesting mix. Well, I'm an interesting mix regardless, but an interesting mix of both my grandfather and father and their management styles and leadership styles. And I think that's a pretty unique, just knowing other people from Oklahoma, other friends of mine who grew up in family businesses, very few of them, make it past the second or third generation.
Right.
Or they sell out, or, different things happen.
Yeah.
But to be able to have two men of integrity to grow up and learn from was a blessing that, very few people get in a family business situation. And so, it's been great, and I've loved being back here and being, I tell people all the time, there's no other place. There's lots of places I like to go. But there's no other place I'd want to live. At least permanently. I could maybe live 3 or 4 months somewhere. But Oklahoma is always home. And we were joking before we started this. We were talking about my friend Shannon at Oklahoma Hall of Fame. And, we both love Oklahoma and everything there is about it. The people, the character of the people, the spirit, everything about it is kind of who we are. And so I would never want to be anywhere else. And I love that our family business is here and that we can grow it and not just be in Oklahoma. We can do stuff outside of the state. And technology allows us to do that without having to move to Houston or move to, some other place where all the other oil companies are or other things are going on. We can stay here and kind of promote Oklahoma and show people that, hey, there are great things going on here.
Continuing to grow and keep doing this thing. And I'm sure you've seen, I haven't been here too long, but I've been here long enough to see it change. So I can't imagine what it's been like for you to grow up in it and see everything that's coming.
That's how I know I'm getting old, because I think of we still call the Hefner Parkway, the Lake Road, because when I was growing up, I don't think Lake Hefner Parkway came till I was in college. In the early 90s, if I remember right, because I brought back some friends my freshman year, and it was still like a 4-lane asphalt road out there. And then when they came back for Kristen and my wedding in 98, they were like, oh my gosh, it's totally different than it was 7 years ago. We drove all these different places, and it's true. A lot happened kind of in that time frame, the 90s, if you will, here in Oklahoma City, to kind of set the stage for where we are today. And it's great. It's been fun to see the changes and see, I would have never guessed growing up that we would have a professional basketball team here. That's, the joke was always, oh, well, maybe we'll get an NHL team. And I say joke just because it seemed so far-fetched. We had 3 or 4 different semi-professional hockey teams that people didn't even know what.
Nobody cared about.
Nobody knew what the hockey rules were. They just went to watch them fight and had no idea what the actual rules of hockey were. And so the idea that we would have a professional team come here seemed like, I don't know how that's going to work. But then to be here when the Hornets came and to see the way the city embraced that situation and where we are today, it's great. I think it's something that those of us that grew up here and, love Oklahoma have probably told people our entire lives. At SMU, there were plenty of Oklahoma people, but a lot of Texas people, a lot of people from California, and I was always shocked at how many people at SMU in Dallas had never spent any time or even been to Oklahoma. And it was great to be able to share, my hometown with them and show them around. And so it's even better now having something like the Thunder that people nationally can see and be like, oh, those seem like pretty great people there.
And then they come here and like, oh, there's actually more than a basketball team here. There's actually some other cool stuff as well.
Right. No, culturally, we've grown tremendously. I think just I think the thing that the Thunder gave people in Oklahoma City was just kind of a little more pride. I think, for a lot of times people were, or for a long time, not me, but I think a lot of people were embarrassed to be from Oklahoma because they thought, oh, all these other places are way better. You know me well enough to know that, I kind of like to be the thorn. And so I have no problem. Yeah. I've always been a proud Oklahoman, and, whether we would travel when I was a kid to New York or to, California or wherever, and people would ask where we were from, I would always say Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And they're like, where? Yeah. And we're like, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Like, how do you not know where that is?
Yeah.
And when in college, when we would travel places, people would, be like, oh, he's from Oklahoma. And I was like, no, I'm from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Yeah. But it's been great to see the city grow and to see the people here. I mean, my kids, are happy to be from here. Mm-hmm. I think it's great for kids to grow up here, go out, experience other things, and then make their own decision whether they want to come back or not. But there's a lot to come back to now. So.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, like you've been the family business, and and your dad, granddad have always been involved in the city as well, not just the oil side of things or the fuel side of things. You've been involved in, all these boards that you volunteer on and stuff like that. Like that's something that, if you go to the website, like integrity is a huge part of the business. And you mentioned it earlier as well, like it's not just the oil stuff. Like you've just been a part of the city and its people for a very long time.
Yeah, and I've been lucky. My parents, my mom and dad in particular, are huge believers in the idea that to whom much is given, much is expected. Mm-hmm. And so, I grew up in a family that, volunteered. My mom and dad volunteered their time, their talents and their treasures anytime they could. And, one of the things my mom always told me was, we may not have a lot of treasures, Matt, but we have a lot of time and we have a lot of talents. So we need to use those where we can. And sorry, that just thinking about my mom, she just had a great influence on my willingness to give back, in the community, because she spent a ton of time doing that, and as well as my dad. But what a gift for a kid to see that from their parents. Right. And know that, hey, we have an 8-hour workday here, but honestly, I'm probably here 4 hours, doing, I'm using air quotes, work stuff. And then, 3 or 4 hours doing volunteer stuff, whether it's coaching, our kids' athletic teams, or whether it's sitting on boards, or whether it's, helping out at school or whatever. I mean, my parents never missed an athletic event of mine my entire life. I say that. I think they missed one game, but they were actually chairing an event for the school that night. Sure. And were unable to make it to a regional basketball game that we played. But I think that's the only game that they missed. And so, that was just a big part of what was important to them. It wasn't just about, oh, hey, you've got to have a business and you've got to be successful in the business. I mean, that's important because that allows you to do other things. Mm-hmm. But they've always been financially and, time supportive of as many things as they could. Yeah. And I think that's, I think that's part of being Oklahoman in a weird way. I think there's something about people here will, get together and help out where they see a need. You know, if there's a tornado or if there's a during the bombing. I mean, there's so many things here that you can look back on and just be like, oh my gosh, it's amazing how people here react in times of need. And then, those are obviously big things that are covered nationally, but just on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I think every board that I've sat on over the years has had, 20 plus people on those boards. And you don't need that many people to volunteer their time to
turn
run
people down.
Right. Some of these organizations.
You have to apply to this so you can,
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you could do the work that a lot of these, boards do with 5 or 10, people max. But you have so many people who are interested and are willing to help and spend the time. And I think that's, that says a lot about who we are.
And I think a lot of the people that I know that are on the boards here, it's not just I'm on this board because it's a resume builder. It's I'm on this board because I generally care what's going on and I want to help impact what it is that I have to live around.
100%. And I think that's, I don't know. I guess I've never looked at, serving on a nonprofit board as being a resume builder just because I'm not sure. Well, probably because I work for a family business and myself, and so I'm not really looking to go anywhere else. I can't remember the last time I had a resume actually printed up. But I think you're right. I think people here want to be involved and want to be a part of that change and be a part of the growth of Oklahoma City and Oklahoma as a state. And so I think it's great the way people are willing to volunteer and volunteer especially their time, because I think that's something that a lot of people think, oh, well, if you don't have money, how are you going to, how are you going to make a change or how are you going to help? Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, the money is an important piece. And, as somebody who's worked on many a development committee, I can tell you, you've got to find people that have money to help make things go. But you've also, I think just importantly, you've got to have people that are willing to get in there and do the work that nobody else wants to do. Right. And organize things and, do all the detail work that makes, events or makes things special. My mom used to always say it's easy to write the check, but it's hard to do the hours and hours of work that it takes beforehand to do the other. And she said they're both equally important. But she said writing the check just takes, a few minutes. And she wrote a lot of small checks to a lot of small things that she couldn't help, but she could write a check for. But then she would spend, she would work what would be the equivalent to 2 full-time jobs doing events for different people and
not
things.
See a cent for it.
Right. But she did it because she loved the Junior League of Oklahoma City, or she loved, Heritage Hall School, or she loved, Kappa Alpha Theta sorority, or, whatever it was at the time, whatever in particular cause that she thought needed help. She was all in. So, but I don't think I like to think of her as being unique, but the older I get, the more I recognize that there are a lot of people who do that. And it's a pretty special, trait for sure. Yeah.
So after you, like I say, you graduate college, you go work for Phillips, and so you said you always kind of knew you wanted to go back to the family business.
I did. We used to play this game when we were little about, if you had 3 wishes, what would your wishes be? You know, and one of them was always to have more wishes, of course.
Never even thought of that.
Right. Well, you hadn't?
No,
come on.
I do,
In Wales, you guys don't want more wishes? You got to use one wish for more wishes.
Usually it's just to stop raining.
Fair enough.
That could take 3 wishes.
Well, there you go. But I used to, and I still tell people this. I mean, if I had one wish, I would just wish that everybody, could live a life like mine. I mean, I've been super blessed with unbelievable parents, grandparents, and to be able to live in a place that, in a city that fosters that kind of, family, unity and lets us do the things that, we want to do and help other people and all of that. And so I think, feel like I'm getting off from what your actual question was, but coming back here and being able to do all of that, has just been. I knew from an early age I wanted to come back and work with my dad.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, I would probably, had I not grown up in this business, this probably would not have been something I would have thought of as being a business I wanted to get into. But we do we do some real estate stuff. We invest in things. It's nice now that it's not just a oil and gas business, distributing fuel. We have a transportation company. We do some other stuff, that is kind of splintered off of that. Well, that was
smart for you guys to do, because if you solely rely on oil, you're going to have stressful days. Like today, for example, yesterday was not a good day for oil, right?
Right. Yesterday was not a good day for anybody listening. The Dow had its biggest daily drop. I think it was over 2,000 points down, and oil went down almost 30% yesterday. And although we're what you consider a super downstream, we're basically the end of the line for oil products, but it has an effect on gas prices. For sure. Parts of the day yesterday, gas was down 29 cents a gallon on the market. It closed a little bit higher than that, I think, but still, that's a big daily drop. In fact, one that we haven't really seen, we saw it go up after 9/11. That day, prices rose 25 to 30 cents in a day, but we haven't seen a drop like that, at least that I can remember. But it's fun to be back here.
When does the racing stuff come in?
We've always sold. When my grandfather was in charge of the business, he made all the decisions kind of in a vacuum, but he loved the distribution part of the name Red Rock Distributing. So he loved real estate. He liked the oil and gas piece of it, but we were a lawn boy mower distributor, got coolers. We had a lubricants business that we were a distributor for. We had what was called a TB&A business, tires, batteries, and accessories for service stations.
Right.
We did that. We had a couple of trucks. I wouldn't call it a transportation business at that time, but we had a few trucks. So we were running about 7 different businesses out of Red Rock Distributing, all of them with some tangible connection, but probably not
all going to the same place roughly, right? All these places are selling the same similar products.
Some similar, right? There were some similarities between them, and in the mid 90s, when I was graduating from school and going to work for Phillips, and Dad and I kind of started talking about, working on a plan for me to come back and how that was going to work and timing and so forth. We were in Colorado and having dinner at one of our favorite places, and he was like, what do you think if we just started paring back and found a couple of things that we did really well instead of doing 7 things kind of, okay. I mean, they're fine, but what would you think about, paring back and just doing 2 or 3 things? And I said, oh, well, I mean, if you pare back too far, there's not going to be enough for me to do when I come back. And he reassured me that this was probably a good idea, and it was a fantastic decision on his part. And we sold off the lubricants business. We sold off all the other pieces of the business, except for including the convenience stores. But the ones that we kept were the wholesale fuel company, the racing fuel division, and the transportation business. And the reason we kept the racing fuel business is because that's the only fuel division that has any margin. Racing fuel has a much higher margin because it basically starts with a basic, what's called a blend stock, which is just regular unlead or whatever. But then most racing fuel back in the 90s was made kind of in the chemicals division of big oil companies. And so they would, add things to the fuel to, get the octanes higher and specific for performance engines and things. And frankly, Mike, you probably know more about compression ratios and all kinds of things.
I wanted to know, like, was it a margin thing, or was it like someone in the family has just a passion for racing as well and wanted to go to these races?
It was 100%. That it was a margin business, unfortunately. But it was also that there weren't, back in the 90s, there were, like I said, we did, in the early 2000s, we did 6 acquisitions, and other companies like us were doing the same thing. So I don't know how much the industry shrunk as far as numbers of people, but from a racing fuel standpoint, there were probably a dozen maybe that sold racing fuel in the state, compared to 300 or 400 that sold gas and diesel and whatever else. So it was already kind of a small business. There were only 2 or 3 other suppliers in Oklahoma City, and so margins were good and it was a good business. Then when the state fairgrounds closed their track, that didn't help racing fuel in Oklahoma City. Neither did laws that changed for MTBE and other things that made it a little bit harder for and more expensive for guys to, from a hobby standpoint, to race cars. And so it's still a part of our business. It's considerably smaller today than it was, when I very first came back. But we have people that come into our office, literally every day to buy racing fuel, but Thursdays and Fridays are big racing fuel days here. They'll come in and fill up their jugs or buy drums of fuel and take it with them to wherever they're
the tracks that they're going to.
And for a while we still do have a sponsorship program, but there was a time when we sponsored 15 or 18 different people in all. We had a guy that raced jet skis. We had a guy that raced motocross. We had 2 or 3 kids, including a young girl who was 12 or 13, who had a drag car, which I didn't even know you could drive a drag car if you weren't 16, but apparently the rules are different.
There are no rules.
And so we had some, we sponsored kids, we sponsored pretty much somebody in all kinds of different, facets of racing. And it was great exposure for us, and it was, a good part of our business. And today, like I said, we still do it. It's just on a much smaller scale because there's not as much racing that happens in Oklahoma City. People are going to Norman or going to, smaller tracks kind of outside of Oklahoma City. And so there's a few racetracks that we still sell.
Yeah, because I guess the real close one would be Hallett, right? Kind of, with more cars, and then there's like a go-kart track in Norman that they use drift car racing for. Right,
and Hallett's by far that's up, in the Bartlesville area. It's definitely the
more professional
road course. You get a lot of the higher end cars that go up there, and they hold races up there. But most of the Oklahoma City racers are guys running what I would call midget cars or sprint cars, dirt track cars, things like that. There's still a decent motocross contingency here. There's the Raynard family in Norman still builds engines, I think, and trains people for motocross. And so we still get some of their people that come up and get fuel, but we had a couple of convenience stores, one in Nichols Hills and a couple in western Oklahoma that sold 101 octane racing fuel before they switched the MTBE rules, and now that they've switched them, you can still get it in a couple of spots, but
Some of the
93.
7-Elevens now carry 93.
Right. 93 is pretty much the highest octane that you see most places sell around here. 91 is considered super, and you can't even buy 93 wholesale in Oklahoma. You have to bring it in from Arkansas.
Oh, really?
But we sell 93 here at our office, and then I think there's a couple of stores up north in Oklahoma City that still sell 93.
Yeah.
But it's all brought in from out of state.
Sure.
So.
And I mean, you went to one of my favorite Formula One's about to start this weekend, which by the time this goes out, the race would have already started. But you got to go to Monaco, right?
I did. That was. That wasn't even on my bucket list of something to do. My sister and her husband had, my brother-in-law had bought tickets to go, and something came up at his work, and they were not going to be able to go. I mean, he knew a couple of months out that they were not going to be able to go. And so they ended up calling my dad and saying, hey, would you guys why don't you and Matt go? And so my dad and I went to Monaco. We actually stayed in Nice for 4 days, and then just went over to Monaco every day. And our Shell rep put us in contact with the guys who were in charge of the F1 team. We got to go on a tour of all of the different teams, race setups. We got to go in the garage. We got to spend time in the trailers where basically they're analyzing the fuel and everything else that's going on second by second.
The data's crazy.
It's unbelievable. And the amount of money that is spent on cars racing around and the amount of money people have that are sitting in the stands,
especially
at
in
these
Monaco,
events, is
or on their yacht.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's unbelievable. One of my jobs when I was at Phillips was I worked on their NASCAR program for a couple of years. And again, this is all only funny because I can barely change the tire on a car. I mean, I'm usually a bigger fan of calling AAA.
And the difference from NASCAR to Formula One, like the cultural difference too, it's completely different.
100%. But it's the interesting thing about auto racing is that you can have a guy who spent his very last dollar to come to the race, sitting next to a person who just flew in on their private jet or has a $2 million motorhome parked outside at a NASCAR
Whose name's
race.
Probably on the side of one of the cars.
Right, but they're sitting right next to each other, and you wouldn't know the difference between the. Maybe they're dressed a little bit differently, or whatever.
They could be both wearing NASCAR shirts.
A lot of times you can't tell the difference, and I learned that in the NASCAR business, if you will, early on, that you can't judge the book by its cover, if you will. And when we went to Monaco for that race, it was shocking how many people it was there. They had saved up every last dollar and were there. And then you saw people on helicopters being shuttled back and forth from a Red Bull floating boat in the harbor, to get in their seats. So it's a crazy. It's a crazy sport, but it's also amazing to learn all the technology that's actually developed. It's basically an R&D.
Yeah, it's mad how much money they spend on R&D.
It has nothing to do with. Yes, it has something to do with winning races and so on and so forth. But the amount of money they spend, they don't get back from an advertising base. People there are not supporting Lewis Hamilton and going out and buying Mercedes because he's the greatest driver ever. They're buying a Mercedes because the technology that they put into their cars is ridiculous and is in the newest Mercedes. Same thing with Ferrari. Most people, that's not on their day-to-day buying list. But when I had the opportunity to sit in a McLaren, which I doubt I will ever have another opportunity to sit in again, but just to sit in that car and
there's
it's
no room
I think it weighed like 25 or 2,600 pounds. I mean, it's, I think a go-kart that I had probably weighed that much back in, 1979. I mean, it's unbelievable the things that they do in Formula One, and it's great to be able to see it in cars today.
Yeah, definitely. What about, I guess, future of, Red Rock, and obviously, you got 2 kids, Micah and
Bella. Yeah.
Micah share a passion for this stuff? Do you think he's going to continue?
It's interesting. I don't know. Our daughter just turned 16, and she's always had a little bit of an interest in the company. And Micah, I don't think, it's so interesting. I don't know that kids today know exactly what they want to do.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with that. I still don't know what I want to do.
I think there's so many more options today, because you can literally start. I mean, I joke with the kids that they're not going to be influencers on, Instagram or anything, but
not YouTubers.
But maybe they will.
Yeah.
There's plenty of non-traditional things now that people can aspire to do, and which I think is great. But that shows you how old I am, that I'm thinking that that's not possible. But I just want them to get a good education in case that doesn't work.
Just in case.
But I hope one of them would take an interest and want to come back. But, I say I always wanted to come back and work with my dad. I always wanted to come back and work with him. But honestly, I always thought, if there was a way I could come back and work with him and, do something in, in the fashion industry, that would be, I would love to do both of those. Shockingly, there's not much crossover between selling gas to convenience stores and fashion, unless it's bad fashion.
If your delivery drivers show up in Gucci like the Italian police officers, where no one at the gas station is going to care.
Right. I mean, a lot of questions start getting asked. I get asked a lot of questions already. But it could be a problem. But I hope the kids, I hope one of them or both of them. I mean, it's, my daughter would be awesome running this business, just like my son would. I mean, they both are super smart and both have a lot of ideas. They remind me a lot of me. They have a lot of ideas and things that they think could happen. And, maybe they come back and, keep the gas distribution piece going, and they decide to add something else that I'm sure if I asked Micah today, he would say he would want to have a gaming business on the side.
You can have a drone delivery service.
Right, or something. Like I mean, he would come up with some other, crazy angle, and Bella's probably a little bit, both of the kids like clothes, but Bella I could definitely see as being somebody who would kind of share a little bit of that passion of mine and trying to figure out a way to do something in that area as well. But if they decide they want to do something else, I just want them to be happy and successful in whatever they do. But it's, people tell you all the time it's in your blood,
right?
And I never really bought into that. But it would be hard for me. We talk about it just with consolidation. If somebody came in and said, "Hey, we want to buy you out," I don't know that it would be a hard thing for me to say, okay, well, let's talk about this, regardless of what kind of a financial...
Because of the family legacy and everything that's
because
tied
of
to
the legacy and just, it's, it's what we do.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that we couldn't do something else, but it would have to be a really good situation in order to stop doing it, because I think it's allowed our family, it's blessed our family with so many different opportunities and things. I would hate to not be doing it and not have that opportunity for my kids if they wanted it.
Yeah,
for sure.
You'd miss it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would. I mean, it's like I said. I mean, I started working here when I was I was probably 5 or 6.
Yeah.
When I would go and clean the tops of, this is back when we had a lubricants business, and I would go to the warehouse we used to be open on Saturdays, and we stopped that as soon as I came back. Working on Saturdays didn't seem like a great idea, Mike.
It's time to play golf.
Yeah.
Or watch football or whatever it is that you do on Saturdays.
Anything. But I started off with a kerosene heater, and I would clean off the tops of oil cans that had been damaged, and we would I'd put the oil into a funnel, and then we'd repackage it all, and do that. And so, I pretty much worked here my entire life, except for when I was in college, and even then, I got a little check every month for going around and checking prices in Dallas and checking different things, bringing back ideas from convenience stores down there for my dad. So it would be hard to give it up for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Well, mate, I really appreciate this time. I know we've known each other quite a while and played a lot of golf together, but it means a lot to sit down and share the family story. Well,
thanks for having me, and it's been great. I love listening to This is Oklahoma and hearing all your other people. It's a great podcast, and I hope you have all the success you deserve.
I hope so too. I just love doing it, and I'm sure our mutual friend Shannon's listened to this, and she's jumping up and down, walking or driving the car, laughing her head off right now because we finally got you on the podcast.
She's waving her flag. I'm going to go get my flag and wave my Oklahoma flag.
Awesome. Well, mate, I really appreciate it. For everyone listening, I'll post all the stuff below, all the links, so if you want to go check out the website or the history. And yeah, go follow Matt on social media. I'll post all of his stuff below. If you want any fashion tips, he's your man for that. Just bought 2 pairs of 6 shoes, which I hope you keep both of them because they're both really cool. But we'll leave it at that. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
This podcast was presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, who've been telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com and definitely on Instagram at oklahomahof. Catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.